Thanks for joining us for another informative edition of Jamaica Magazine. I'm Theodore Henry. Coming up in this half-hour journey, see what's in the government's $25 billion COVID-19 stimulus package to help citizens pull through the crisis. Plus, measures put in place to protect and care for our seniors throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Stay with us for these and much more.
To properly carry out a hand rub, apply a palmful of the product in your cupped hand, covering all surfaces. Rub your hands palm to palm. Rub your right palm over the back of your left hand with interlaced fingers and vice versa. Rub your hands palm to palm with fingers interlaced. Rub the back of your fingers to opposing palms with fingers interlocked. Rotationally rub backwards and forwards the clasped fingers of your right hand in your left palm and vice versa. Once your hands are dry, they are now safe.
The COVID-19 outbreak has placed countries and their citizens across the world under great economic strain and in need of government's interventions. Minister of Finance and the Public Service Dr. Nigel Clark has outlined a $25 billion stimulus package to support Jamaicans throughout this pandemic. Let's find out more.
Yes, there's a national crisis. Yes, we are pulling together. But people have to eat.
As a result, the Andrew Holness administration has announced a raft of measures to keep the economy going despite the COVID-19 pandemic. Watch as Finance Minister Nigel Clark gives a detailed breakdown on the state's $25 billion stimulus package.
The world is facing the most serious disruption to our way of life since the Second World War. This pandemic is nothing like the world has ever experienced before. We need to be prepared for the worst and be ready for a very significant growth setback. As Minister of Finance, I wish to assure the people of Jamaica, Mr. Speaker, that the government will do all we can to ameliorate the effect of this pandemic and to give us the best chance of a speedy recovery. We will be implementing an unprecedented $25 billion fiscal stimulus consisting of a $15 billion tax reduction and tax measures and a $10 billion spending program. Our first goal will be to protect the neediest people from the worst effects of this COVID crisis. We'll be channeling $1.1 billion in additional funding to the Ministry of Labour and Social Security to be used to increase the PATH cash grants during this period, April to June. Pension payment for June will be automatically made on the basis of the last life certificate on hand without the need for renewal in April, Mr. Speaker. We will allocate an extra $150 million to the Ministry of Local Government to supplement the poor relief program and their budget in general. We will be reallocating expenditure in the MICOF budget to provide $200 million for relief to small farmers. For loans currently in repayment, the Student Loan Bureau will waive late fees for the period April, May, and June. And the Student Loan Bureau, very importantly, will defer the repayment of all loans, principal and interest, for 3 months. We care and help is on the way. We introduced the COVID allocation of resources for employees, the CARE program. We will introduce the Business Employee Support and Transfer of Cash, the Best Cash program, which will provide temporary cash transfers to registered businesses operating in the hotels, tours, and attraction segments of the tourism industry who are licensed based on the number of workers they keep employed who are under the income tax threshold of $1.5 million. We care and help is on the way. To qualify, each tourism business will need to apply for Best Cash by filling out the required form online. They would then file their payroll returns as usual on the 15th of April, the 15th of May, the 15th of June. And for each employee with taxable income that is less than the threshold of 1.5 million that they keep in their employ, the government will transfer funds at a rate of $9,000 per fortnight to that tourism-related business by direct transfer to their bank account, paid monthly, Mr. Speaker. For the months of April, May, and June, Mr. Speaker, that will equate to $54,000 for each employee that they retain. We also understand that employees from industries other than tourism will be laid off. For that reason, Mr. Speaker, we will implement the Supporting Employees with Transfer of Cash, the Set Cash program, which will provide temporary cash transfers to individuals where it can be verified that they lost their employment since the 10th of March. Employees, Mr. Speaker, will be required to apply online, filling out an online application where they'll provide details on themselves and the employment that they lost. We will be working with employers and with the umbrella groups of employers to encourage them to fill out those P45 forms and upload so that their employees can benefit from the CARE Cash Set payment. The unfortunate reality is that the employment status of many Jamaicans is informal. These are challenging cases, Mr. Speaker, but no less deserving. For the drivers on Juta, on Maxi, and JCAL who may not be in the formal system, Mr. Speaker, we will work with the umbrella organizations to see how we can best set up a verification system and how they can be included, Mr. Speaker. For the craft vendors in the various markets, we will work with those who control the venues from which you operate. And for the market vendors, Mr. Speaker, we will work with the municipal authorities who have registration lists. Apart from these categories I've mentioned, there are others. So, Mr. Speaker, what we will be doing is allocating a further $1 billion in additional funding to the Ministry of Labour and Social Security for them to work on this element of the CARE program, Mr. Speaker. We care and help is on the way. In response, Mr. Speaker, to the escalating dislocation that COVID is likely to have, Mr. Speaker, we need to step in with direct support to our small and micro businesses. All small businesses with sales of 50 million or less who file tax returns in the 2019-20 financial year and who file payroll returns indicating that they have employees on staff, Mr. Speaker, will be eligible for a one-time COVID small business grant of $100,000, Mr. Speaker. This intervention, we are budgeting that it will cost $800 million, and the government will make $1.2 billion available in the form of grants to businesses operating, especially small businesses operating in the tourism and related sectors, Mr. Speaker. Up to the 30th of June, Mr. Speaker, Tax Administration Jamaica will facilitate the issuing of one-off or single-use tax compliance certificates to businesses who may fall into non-compliance. Tax Administration Jamaica will issue no new summonses or initiate any new court proceedings or enforcement actions for non-compliance until after the 30th of June. However, Mr. Speaker, reminders and notices will continue to be generated. We care and help is on the way. This is a test of our economic resilience. Yes. And we will eventually come out ahead.
government has implemented a number of measures to protect the well-being of our seniors 65 and older who are deemed more at risk for more serious complications from COVID-19. Hear more in a recently held digital town hall centered on this group.
Red roses too.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Prime Minister's Digital Town Hall for Senior Citizens. I'm Naomi Francis. Well, the government has implemented several measures to deal with the novel coronavirus or COVID-19. Now, it particularly affects the vulnerable, which is really the senior citizens aged about 65 and older. And so earlier this week, the government implemented several measures that we're going to talk about today.
The present order is for the next 14 days. We will review, as we have been doing, in about 10 days, but we review at every cabinet meetings, and the cabinet meets sometimes twice weekly now, sometimes even 3 times for the week, to review. What is the objective of the review? The objective of the review is to ensure that the increase in cases are more aligned to the flatter curve, and as we keep that alignment, then we will be better able to determine when we are at a manageable peak and then at a reduction, and then we can start to, in an appropriate way, loosen some of the restrictions that are in place. So it's very difficult to set a timeline as to when we would relax restrictions. It all depends on the number of new cases. And what does that depend on? How people in Jamaica behave. In other words, the relaxation of the measures depend on how well we are faithful to the measures, how well we wash our hands, sanitize. If we have to sneeze or cough, we use the appropriate methods, that is, sneeze in your elbow or in a tissue and dispose of it immediately, and then sanitize or wash your hands. Be careful how you touch surfaces. Sanitize surfaces regularly. For persons who are at high risk, the group for which we have kept this town hall, the persons 65 years and over, but we are focused on stay at home for the 75-year-olds and over, that they should, as far as possible, keep out of regular circulation in the population, and maintain social distance in all the functions that we do. That is for everyone.
I think one of the things that our older people need to understand, PM, and it builds on what you said, is whereas older people are not at any increased risk per se, they are at increased risk of severe illness. When we look at the statistics coming out of China, and the graph tells it, the case fatality rate for younger people, which does not minimize severity of illness, is below 1% right up to age 59. When you get to 60 to 69, the case fatality in China, which is the number of people dying, is 5%. When you get to 70 to 79, it is 10%. And when you get into the 80 and over age group, it's 18%. So you are perfectly correct that these, if our older people get COVID-19, the severity of their illness is going to not only take up hospital beds, but it's going to deprive our families and our communities of an elder person, of that wisdom, of that child care taker. So it is an important loss to the community in general. Now, the reason for all of this is that if older people come in contact with the virus, and that's the critical point of what you're doing, what the government is doing, what all of us are preaching, they must not come in contact. In the body, the immune system is less efficient than yours. And not only that, the cells in the body are also diminished. So once they get this infection, the likelihood of it ravishing their body is high.
From the OPM, Ask OPM email, Prime Minister, Ms. Trudy May asks, should persons who live in households with seniors leave the home for their protection?
That's not what the government is saying. Of course, that is up to you if you want to go to that extreme. But what the government is saying is that you should take extra precaution in ensuring that you have in place measures for the sanitization of your hands and surfaces, that where possible, when you come home from work, you go through with these procedures, that as far as possible, you ensure that your seniors don't have to go outside, and you maintain, as much as you can, social distancing.
I have one specifically for you, Doc. My mom, Miss Jillian Dawkins, asks, my mom is 84 years old. She's a cancer survivor. She has a clinic appointment next week. What does that mean? Can she go? Can't she go?
Absolutely, yes. She can go to her next appointment. What we encourage is dialogue with her healthcare facilities so that she can get there safely in a sterile environment and back home again. So yes, once she maintains dialogue with her hospital team or parish health facility team, she can in fact go to her appointments.
Just to point out that the Ministry of Health has said that they will put in place a scheduling regime.
Absolutely.
To ensure that there are specific times to treat with the appointments that are non-COVID related.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister, for that. Let's get the ministers involved as well, because ministers, the Prime Minister introduced the order yesterday concerning what will happen, especially to our senior citizens. One of the questions we have concerned NIS benefits, and there was another one as well concerning visits to the homes for the indigent. Let me ask Minister Mackenzie to respond to that one first.
Well, it's good to be a part of this very valuable and worthwhile discussion. We have put in restrictions on visits to the infirmaries because our infirmaries, we have 17 such facilities across the country with a population of close to 2,300, with 90% of the residents in these facilities falling in that category that we consider to be vulnerable, that age group that would be prone to the disease once it gets in. So we have put in that restriction, and we are enforcing that restriction because we want to be sure that persons who are accessing the facility do so in an organized fashion. One of the things that we have done also is we're working closely with the Ministry of Health in establishing the kind of screening mechanism, not just for those who are going to be visiting the infirmary, but also for persons who are working in the infirmary. So someone take the bus, has to move amongst other persons, come in. We are saying those days are over. We are providing the necessary equipment. So you come, change clothes, put on your working clothes, you go through a process of sanitization, and then you start to deal with the residents in the infirmary. So we are restricting visits to the facility, and over the next 60 days, we are not accepting any new residents into the facility.
Will there be special provisions for pensioners? What about those with NIS?
The payments coming out of NIS, once you qualify for the pension, of course it is based on a number of factors. Yeah, it's an actuarial fact computation that would have been based on earnings, the contributions at the time. So it is difficult for us at this time to say that we are going to increase the NIS benefits having regards to the factors that would have gone into the determination of what that payment is. But what we can say is that for persons who receive payments by way of the payment voucher, effective March 30th, all payments for the month of April can be encashed at once. The Ministry of Labour and Social Security is the lead on the National Relief Response Program. And in circumstances like you would have had in 7 Miles, Bull Bay, and even in Clarendon, we take the lead as a ministry in terms of coordinating the relief response. What I will say is that so far as a government, there have been in excess of 2,000 care packages that have been distributed. In terms of sanitation packages, we have distributed in excess of 1,800, water, juices, and in fact, this is a convenient time for us to say thanks to our corporate partners. I'll refer to them as corporate partners for now.
If you have someone who is at home or under your care that is an elderly person who is physically challenged, and you are not able to support that person, then the various local offices of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security and the local offices or officers of the poor relief departments, which is usually centered around the municipal corporations, reach out to them. At this time, they have a duty and they will be empowered to respond. I want to clarify the stay-at-home order. Stay at home is the headline, meaning that's what I want you to hear and know. However, you are allowed to leave your home to conduct what we call the essentials of life. So if you have to get your medicine, if you have to get food at the market, if you have to get water, some people still have to do that, and exercise. You want to do a little walk around your yard, walk down to the end of the street and back, if you can avoid that. Those things are quite fine. What we wouldn't want you to be doing at this time is to be unnecessarily exposing yourself to the public. And there's a reason for that, which we'll get into later, and that is we are now transitioning into a phase of the epidemic which is described as community spread. That means that the virus is now in the community. It's not fenced in clusters, it's generally in the community. So the risk of you getting it is increased, and of course the risk of you dying from it is even greater. So we want you to, as much as possible, follow the order of the government, which is to stay in, but you are allowed to conduct once per day the essentials of life.
I have Melinda who's asking, hello, I have a diabetic amputated mother. That's how she writes it. She needs to go to the clinic 2 times a week to have her wounds dressed. Only means of transport is taxi. With a virus, she's not safe to leave the house. Is there going to be free mobile nurses to go around to help non-mobile elderly persons?
If it is that she needs help with getting to a healthcare facility to be dressed, then she can certainly call the helplines. We have them up and running 24 hours a day to provide that ambulance assistance to get them to the clinic. So I really don't see any reason why she cannot go to her clinics to get her twice weekly dressings. Obviously, when I get back into office, I will speak with the Chief Medical Officer to discuss these sort of variables in the system.
Anyone who is in this age group that has a situation that would lead to distress, now is the time to reach out, as you have said, to the Ministry of Health, but you also, the duty lies with the Ministry of Labour and Social Security and the poor relief, which ties in to the municipal council. So once you reach out to those agencies, they are all empowered to be able to respond to these specific circumstances.
See trees of green, red roses too.
The National Solid Waste Management Authority, NSWMA, wishes to advise the public that the Mandela Park in St. Andrew is closed. This is in adherence with government's restrictions on gatherings in public spaces. The halfway tree-based park will be closed until further notice. The NSWMA will continue to closely monitor the announcements of the Ministry of Health and Wellness to make decisions in the best interests of the citizens of Jamaica.
The Ministry of Health and Wellness has repeatedly shared that COVID-19, though a serious disease, is not a death sentence, and so it's important that we treat each other with care and respect and follow the information shared by the government to safeguard our individual health and the rest of society.
Scientists and doctors globally are learning lessons from the negatives and taking comfort in this positive. Far more persons are recovered from the novel coronavirus than those who have died. That leads to one hypothesis: the coronavirus disease 2019 is not a death sentence. Globally, we have heard that thousands of COVID-19 patients have recovered from the virus and a smaller number have died. Unfortunately, on Wednesday, March 18, Jamaica recorded its first COVID-19 related death. The good news, though, is that a few of the patients confirmed with the virus are showing signs of improvement. The United States Embassy in Kingston has reported that patient 2, an employee of the organization, is recovering well. Positive signs for the country, which has recorded double figures of confirmed cases.
For the 14 persons that are under treatment, now we have 13 persons that are stable and are doing well. 3 are totally asymptomatic now, and we will start their discharge testing shortly.
They're actually doing quite well. As a matter of fact, the early patients looked quite well. They're eating, they're smiling. Of course, there's a tension of this new thing, but they're not incapacitated, right? We have some new cases now. I can't comment on those just yet, but certainly the earlier cases that we had who are still with us, they look like you and me. Most persons will recover. Probably about over 80% of persons will probably have a relatively mild illness. But there are persons that, for whatever reason, who will get a more serious infection. So persons over 60 tend to have a worse outcome, and persons with what we call comorbid factors, so persons who are hypertensive or diabetic or even asthmatic, tend to have a worse outcome. But that doesn't mean that everybody who has that will, die.
It cannot be overstated.
COVID-19 is the name that they have finally decided on for the name of the disease. So that's coronavirus disease 19 for 2019. And the name of the virus that is causing that is now named SARS-CoV-2. So it's that new that persons had to deliberate for a while to say, what are we going to call this new virus? And what are we going to call this new disease?
Is it airborne?
In recent times, there are persons who are querying the possibility of airborne, but that would not be the primary method of transmission. It's just that we should now begin to think that it could be airborne.
Just to recap, remember, contracted COVID-19 is not a death sentence. Just call the Ministry of Health and Wellness if you see signs or have symptoms related to the virus. Do not proceed to your private doctor or a health facility.
We've come to the end of our half-hour journey, but be sure to come right here tomorrow for another informative edition of Jamaica Magazine. Until then, continue to watch these and other programs by logging on to our website. That's at www.jis.gov.jm or subscribing to our YouTube channel. You may also find us on all the major social media platforms and through our mobile app that's Android and iOS compatible. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Theodore Henry, reminding you to practice proper hygiene and social distancing as you protect yourself from COVID-19. Do take care.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.